I don't have OCD anymore. I mean, at all. Even hearing myself saying this out loud, it's really weird because I had OCD for so many years. I was doing compulsions every day for hours a day, and now I can say I don't have it at all. I have no more symptoms. I don't do any compulsions. I don't look for reassurance. I don't ruminate about any OCD topic. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I did to fully recover from OCD and give you tips about how you can recover as well. Bear with me a bit here. I'm going to talk about how I got to where I am now. When I first got diagnosed, it really wasn't that surprising. Even before I knew it was called OCD, I knew the things I was doing weren't normal. What I mean is, I wouldn't want other people to know what I was doing and felt ashamed most of the time about it. I would feel mortified if people knew what I was thinking about. That's kind of how I knew something was wrong. I was also spending more and more time thinking about things I knew were really unlikely to happen or absurd, but I couldn't stop focusing on them. I couldn't stop ruminating and planning about these fears that I had. But no matter how much I thought about it, and no matter what compulsion I was doing to make myself feel better, I would only feel better for a little while, and then I'd start thinking about it again. So I spoke to a therapist, and I got diagnosed with OCD and started doing treatment. My therapist was nice. She seemed really motivated to help me get better, and she was really confident in the treatment she was giving me at first. ERP, exposure and response prevention. It felt like I was really improving. My symptoms were getting better. I wasn't thinking about it as much, and even when I was feeling less anxious about it. And it also felt really good knowing that what I was doing in my head was already mapped out by somebody else before me. It was called this, and this is the treatment for it. Very easy and clear cut. If you follow these steps, you'll get better. At this point, though, I was spending 3 to 4 hours a day thinking about my OCD theme. Based on the survey that I did and the information I was giving to my therapist, she said my symptoms would be considered severe. Most of my compulsions were mental or reassurance seeking. So I started ERP sessions. My therapist told me to write down a few words describing my fears and told me to put them in a dresser drawer. It wasn't really that anxiety inducing, but I was just following the process. Then the next session, she told me to write down my fears again, but this time to be more descriptive about what I was afraid of. She warned me I'd feel a bit more anxious about it. The sessions after that, I was supposed to think about my fear in more detail. How she explained it was, everything was supposed to be progressively worse, to think about my fear as realistically as possible and make me feel more anxious, but then not do a compulsion afterwards to make me feel better. If you did ERP treatment before, it follows a very similar pattern. But after doing this for a few months, I got stuck. I made progress for a while, and it was significant. But then I got to the point where I was thinking about my fear very realistically, but there was no solution to it. I explained this to my therapist and I asked her kind of what we should do next. And she said I had to accept the uncertainty of the things I was afraid of actually happening. And that's where I was stuck. I could never be okay with my OCD fears happening because they literally would have ruined my life. That was why I was thinking about them all the time, because it meant so much to me. We tried different mindfulness exercises, acceptance and commitment therapy, and a few other things designed to get me past this stuck point in my recovery. But nothing seemed to work. I spent another year in therapy, but had very little progress after the first few months. And if anything, I would say all that time I spent after the first few months, I was slowly getting worse and worse. I was spending more and more time ruminating, and it went back to my original 3 to 4 hours a day. Some days it was even higher than that. My OCD theme changed every few months too. By this point, I went through harm OCD, HOCD, real event OCD, relationship OCD, existential OCD. I think there were only a few categories that I didn't have. After doing this for such a long time, one day I just reached a breaking point and decided to map out exactly what I was doing in my head. I realized that the problem wasn't my OCD themes. My problem was thinking about them. I kept trying to think of a solution to the things I was afraid of or make plans about what I would do, but it never worked. That's when I realized the pattern is what I needed to stop. I was never going to stop being afraid of my OCD fears happening. That's because what I was afraid of was very scary. I'm just as afraid now of my old OCD themes coming true. They're just as terrifying because the images and the thoughts of these things happening are terrible. But the difference is I'm not spending the whole damn day thinking about it. I realized everybody else would be just as afraid as I was about these things happening in their own lives. But they don't spend every day playing out scenarios, looking for reassurance, thinking about it. That's what needed to change for me. My background is in neuroscience, so I know how the human brain works. If you keep thinking about something, the connections in your brain related to what you're thinking about will get stronger and stronger. And that's what I was doing every single time OCD came into my head and I kept interacting with it. So you thinking about it all the time is actually making your OCD worse. After mapping out what I did in my head and researching the science about what people with OCD do, the pattern was really clear. People with OCD did the same pattern I was doing in my head for whatever topic was really important to them. So if you stop thinking about your OCD topic, the whole cycle just falls apart. But that's the thing. How do you stop thinking about it? The reason why you're thinking about your OCD topic is because it's very important to you. It's not going to stop being important to you. So what do? You have to take a step back and realize that what you're doing actually has nothing to do with your OCD topic. You planning, ruminating, checking, and reassuring yourself, or any other compulsion you were doing, is not going to change your OCD fear. It might feel like it will in the moment. You might feel better after you think about it and make a plan. But the feeling doesn't last. The thoughts will come back, the doubt will come back, and the cycle begins again. You need to see the pattern you've been doing for the last few days, or weeks, or months, or even years, and recognize that it didn't help your OCD fear go away. What you need to do is see that this pattern is actually affecting your life in reality. What you're afraid of happening is probably 1,000 times worse than you just planning or thinking about your fear. But the whole point is that you doing these compulsions is a real life cost. It takes you away from your family. It takes you away from your passions. It robs you of precious moments or taints important parts of your life. Taking a step back and recognizing that forces you to make a decision about your OCD fear. And then you can stop engaging with it. That's what I did. That's how I got better. I realized that me thinking about the fears was the disorder. Me taking time every single day and doing this cycle and thinking about things and going through my fears was the disorder. That's what I needed to stop doing. I sat down one day, thought about my fear, determined if it was more or less likely to happen, and then made a decision not to engage with anything related to that topic again. After I did this, I didn't have OCD anymore. There's other steps as well about how to actually stop engaging with the fears. I lay out exactly what I did and what you can do as well in my OCD guide. If you haven't checked it out yet, I recommend that you do. If you watch the guide and you're struggling to implement the material, I also created a course that's more in-depth, so it goes into more detail about each of the topics I laid out in the guide. I also answer questions specific to your OCD theme as well in the course. If you're still struggling and you still feel like the material is not specific to your situation, I also offer one-on-one coaching as well, where we can go through your OCD topic individually and iron out exactly where it is that you're getting stuck on this method. If you look up the information about OCD recovery online, you'll see that most people who go through treatment don't actually recover. I think that's because, fundamentally, the treatments aren't that good. I went through the process. I can say that even though the treatment was reassuring at first, and it did help a bit, it didn't end my OCD. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to be done with this. I wanted to stop thinking about these topics altogether. Having lived this disorder for so many years, and having it become very severe, and now fully being recovered, meaning I don't have compulsions, I don't ruminate at all anymore, I can tell you that if you understand what you're doing in your head, you'll be able to stop the OCD theme you have now, and stop future themes from developing, because you know what you're doing. You know what process happens in your brain, so you can just stop doing it. I haven't had an OCD theme since I've recovered, and I know that I never will in the future, because I know what I'm doing, so I'm just not going to engage. Since being recovered, I've had fears come in again. I caught on very quickly, and didn't let it grow into a monstrous OCD theme. I just stopped it right away. I said, no, I'm not going to do this again. I know where it leads. I'm not going to engage. You have the power to end your OCD forever. I hope this is the last OCD video you watch.